Hi, this video is meant to give an introduction to the purpose of grading conferences and how they fit into this class's work. I'll include a lot of information on how you can prepare. So it'd be best to have maybe some notes ready for you to take or to have your piece with you so you can kind of follow along as I talk about it. Over the next few days, I'll be looking at your writing that you've submitted on Canvas, and I'll be giving my comments as a reader responder. I won't be evaluating the quality when I look over it this first time, but I'll be replying to your requests for feedback. In the grading conference, on the other hand, we will be evaluating your writing based on the criteria on the rubric. For this to happen, you'll need to come prepared, having already evaluated your writing yourself, determining if you're still developing the skill in the writing, have competently shown it in the writing, or have excelled in that area of the writing. So you're going to bring the rubric that I handed to you in class. It's also on Canvas if you need to print it out. You're going to bring it to the conference filled out ahead of time. You'll have annotated your final draft, and I'll show you an example of how to do this, and have an explanation that reveals how you've graded yourself. So what you see in the writing and what you're thinking about it that has led you to that certain conclusion. So scoring yourself can be challenging because when I ask you to do that on the rubric, I'm not asking you how you feel about the writing or how much work you've done for the writing. I'm asking you to examine what your writing shows based on those different criteria on the rubric. So I'll come with a rubric as well, but not filled out. As you walk me through your piece and talk about each of the criteria, I'll listen to your evaluation and I'll be making notes for myself. I also might bring up a place that we can look at together where maybe you show in the writing that there could be some improvement, or sometimes people miss areas where they've really excelled at something. And so I want to be sure to highlight that as well when we talk about the different criteria. So in this first grading conference, however, I will be spending most of the time listening to you with an open mind, maybe asking a few questions or prompting the conversation along so you just feel like you're guided and on track. So what do you need to do to prepare? Well, first, you have to have the rubric with you, so make sure that you have that. Second, I would like you to bring your final draft to the conference, and you can do this in one of two ways. You can print out your copy, like I have here, the printed out copy, or you can share the copy with me on Google Docs if that's something that you prefer. Because what I'm going to ask you to do is literally point out moments in the writing when you talk about the criteria on the rubric. So if you want to have those things highlighted in a Google Docs with some comments to yourself on the side, that would work. You could also have places highlighted and notes to yourself in the margins, just labeling the different criteria. So if you're uncertain about how to score yourself before you come to the conference, that's okay. You absolutely need to have your final draft with your explanations ready. And you could say, I might be this, I might have this score, because that's something that, again, is very unfamiliar to many of you, scoring yourself. And so if you come to the conference uncertain in one or two areas, that's fine. But you should have some clear decisions made for yourself based on your writing as you come in. So remember the criteria, there's the list of them in the middle, and then I have the developing, then the competent, then the excel or excellent. So remember that developing means that you know that you still need to put a decent amount of work into this type of a skill. Maybe this is the first time you've tried out the organization or paragraphing and you're like, I have no idea if this works or not. I just did it where it seemed okay or where my peers gave me feedback. So maybe that's developing range, where you kind of tried to do this, but maybe didn't give it much attention, or you just have no idea how to fix it. You could think this tends to be a weakness that I have as a writer, and so I know I'm still working on it, and I tried to improve, but I know that I'm not there yet. And maybe in one area I worked on it a lot, but the writing as a whole, I don't really have this skill mastered in any way. So then you have the competent, which is the middle one. That means that you can find multiple areas in your writing that show that you have built in those details, the word choice, the significance, where you built those in purposefully and you're like, I've worked on this. I know it's not perfect. I know there are other areas that I can fix and I either didn't have time, didn't know how, just kind of felt burnt out, or I just don't think it's that great, but I did a solid job throughout. So that's what the competent means. Solid throughout, some areas maybe not as good as others. Excellent means throughout all the writing, this is a place where you excel. You have really, really worked on word choice in every single paragraph. You have really purposefully chosen how to use those paragraph breaks, how to introduce your topic, guide the reader through an end. So that when it's excellent, that's like, you've hit it out of the park. That is something that you feel really confident in because you can point it out in multiple places in your writing. So what does this look like to actually talk through your evaluation? Let's take my paper for an example, and I'm going to talk about the structure of my piece. So this is in that criteria where it says structure, and it talks about leading the reader through, not having choppy things, choppy paragraphs, or places that seem really disjointed, like, wait, what happened? So I'm going to talk about how in my piece I purposefully structured it. So one of the ways that I purposefully built in structure is with the timestamps. And I would have these pointed out, or I would have these annotated to say structure and structure. So the timestamps in my piece is something I did very purposefully. I didn't just do this because it seemed like a good idea. I think that the timestamps really offer a clear transition, and I think it communicates clearly something that's key to this significant moment, which is that this is a project that took place over an extended period of time. It wasn't just one day I decided to do this, but I had to prepare for it, I had to work at it, and then I had to continue going back to the garden again and again. So I wanted that extended project element to be front and center in my piece, and I think the timestamps really set that off. Also, I think my dialogue is really clearly and cleanly formatted. So I do a new paragraph each time a person talks, and I think I did that really well. So that shows a really good structure in that section. Finally, I even used repetition in my paragraphs at one point right here. So I said, oh, it's actually right here. So this is where I highlighted. So I highlighted this so I would bring it to it, and I would probably put like structure on the side of this so I would know what it was that I was evaluating this for. So I used a repetition of a structure to purposefully show that as I sat in my backyard, it's like thing after thing after thing came up as something that I could do, that I just had a lot of work to do. It's like one thing after another after another. And I used the repetition of the paragraphing and the word I to show that kind of like it's just kind of piling up before I have this interruption with the dialogue. There are a couple of places that I use single sentence paragraphs that I thought really worked. And in particular, I think this does, because this is a really significant thing where I say I can't do it all, but I can do one thing. So I thought that was really central to the message of this piece. And this looking ahead, tomorrow I'll plant, we'll see what a third planting can yield. So that's a single line paragraph really emphasizing the hope for the future. And then finally, I showed that again in the very last line I had with a single sentence paragraph. Stepping out the door, I put on my crusted gloves and headed to the garden once more. So that willingness to re-engage with this project again and again, despite setbacks, taking moments of rest, but also showing that resolve to step back in. So I think the structure in my paper really did that, and that was very purposeful. So there are some areas that I didn't go back and look at the paragraphs too much, but I think overall I did pretty well. So I would give myself an 11. I think I excelled at it, but it wasn't perfect. And so that's an example of talking through one of the criteria. I would say personally, structure was one of the things that I worked on most, and so I had the most to say about that. And so maybe for my word choice, I could point out a couple of places, but it wouldn't be as long of an explanation. We are going to be having 10 minutes for this grading conference. So again, it might be something that's worth practicing, writing out your evaluations and talking through it. This also might be a great thing to do with a peer from the class, to sit down, to evaluate, to ask some questions and for their feedback, because sometimes it's kind of nice to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. and just read it to that person. Say, does this make sense what I'm talking about when I talk about this criteria and I point out these things? Again, just to practice talking through it might be great, because I can imagine that this might be something that creates some anxiety or some nerves, like, oh, I've never really talked about my writing like this with a teacher or professor before. But it's something that if you do feel like you have that anxiety, practice it through, walk through with a friend who you know is going to be supportive, and then you can be better prepared to come meet with me. Remember to come when you signed up to come. We'll make sure to review that in class, but that's really, really important for this because we only have those 10 minutes. So make sure you show up a little bit early and are ready to go when your time has started. As always, email with me with any questions, and I look forward to seeing you in our grading conference together.